little, and I think that helped.
Welcome to Nerdarchy. For nerds, by nerds. I'm Nerdarchy Dave, and today I'm joined by Bill Allan. How are you doing today, sir?
I am good, my fellow nerd. It's good to be old and a nerd.
It is. It is. I mean, being old means we're still alive, so that's always a plus, right?
Yes, we gain wisdom and intelligence, but
But our con, strength, and dex all go down.
I don't know what happened to my dexterity, man. I used to be able to run a pretty quick sprint, but now, oof,
Yeah, I don't. I don't know if that's. I don't know if that's dex or not, though.
yeah,
You know,
that's just,
it's cons
that's
for
just,
the stamina for sure,
yeah.
but being
Well,
fast.
I don't know how this would translate in game terms, Dave, but I tried to play a little game of touch football at the park with my high school son and his friends. And that was a painful mistake that caused bodily aches for at least 4 days afterwards. So,
Yeah, how long ago was this?
this was, probably August, early September. And, I'm like, I could still throw the ball. It's
Yeah.
when I was trying to match them in coverage on defense and I'm chasing these young, boys around. Like, I couldn't keep up, man. I rolled my ankle. I'm like, I was out of breath. It's rough.
I do know, unfortunately. It sucks getting old. I mean, I feel like anymore all my joints are made of paper mache, so
Yep. Yep.
it's brutal. So you got your own YouTube channel, and over there, um, you do something a little bit different than any of the other YouTube channels that I've seen, or even Twitch streams. And you do gameplays, but with high school students.
Yes. It, it's funny because I started the channel as just a repository for to put like everything that I was interested in, right? Like,
Yeah,
whether it was food or music or, movie, film clips, terrain crafting, unboxings, that kind of stuff. And it was just like there was no focus to it. And there still is no focus to it. It's just all the crap that I put online. But what really hit was the D&D with high school students, which actually started off as a total fluke, right? There was no plan for this. We had been shooting some actual plays in the studio with Brian Thomas from Initiative Coffee Company, and it was his campaign, and I was just kind of doing the video stuff for it. And some of the table was set up still. There's some books and dice and terrain and minis out on the table. And my students in my classes, I teach media classes, so it's film and TV production, all very hands-on. And some of the students in the classes towards the end of the semester saw this and they're like, Mr. Allan, could we play D&D instead of producing our final films? And I was like, no. And then I thought about it and I was like, actually, yes, you could. I'm like, that would be kind of cool. You guys would have to do, the setup. You'd have to do all the lighting and camera positionings and crew it and shoot it. And, but yeah, that'd be kind of a cool learning experience. So, I mean, Dave, this was like 2 weeks before the end of the semester, total rush job,
yeah.
no plan. Um, but what ended up happening was uh, we shot 4 episodes and it was great. It was a great production experience for the kids in the class who worked on the crew. It was a great, learning experience with D&D. And that was it. Just 4 episodes and that was it. And I was like, well, that was fun. Well, meanwhile, we go on Christmas break and the views start blowing up and people really start engaging in this. And I'm like, wow, this is kind of a thing. And people start saying, like, when's season two? And I'm like, season two? I'm like, what? There's no season two, Well, demand was there. And I had a new group of kids, new semester, and they kind of saw this and were like, yeah, let's do it, man. So we kind of started putting it together, and season two went really well. And then there was summer, and then season three, so kind of almost like fitting with the high school schedule. Like every semester, we were doing a new season. And it just kept to gradually build, and it led to a lot of other crazy cool things too.
So, do you find the audience is other high school kids, younger people, a mix? Who's watching these kids play?
It's a really interesting thing, dude. Um, so I will say that there are a fair amount of adults, probably in a mix of ranges like 30s, 40s, maybe even 50s, who are watching it and get this nostalgia vibe, right? Because what they're typically seeing are high school kids who are just learning to play D&D. They make all the newbie mistakes, sometimes they come in clutch with really creative ideas, or they role play a really fun character. And I think for a lot of the people our age, it's a little bit of a nostalgia trip. They really dig watching these kids learn the process of playing the game, whether they make mistakes or whether they're heroic or whatever it is, so they kind of get into it for that. Then I do get a lot of high school and college age kids who are watching it because like these are their peers and they're either experienced gamers who are like, sharing helpful tips or their fellow newbies or people who are like, oh, I watch a lot of streams and I really want to get into it, but this is cool because these people are just like me. So it's a kind of a cool mix. And I would say overall it is very it's very inspirational to see how supportive people are of the shows and of the cast members. Do we get some trolls every once in a while who just feel the need to, you know, point out the flaws or the bad moves that the people make? Yeah, sure. But
You,
like,
you've got two things that are going to attract trolls immediately: the other gender and noobs, right?
yeah,
So people are going
right.
to be douchey.
Yeah. And some people, that are douchey a lot of times, I don't even respond to them. You know, some of the cast members read the comments and some of them don't. I would say the majority don't actually read the comments, but a few of the cast members, especially more recently from like season 3 and season 4, they do read the comments. And, I, there have been some awkward moments too, where like some of the girls were like, yeah, I'm not sure I feel comfortable about, you know, old men, saying that I'm cute. And I'm like, oh, I get it. I'm like, that's why you shouldn't read the comments.
Yeah, yeah.
For
You're
one,
right. It's creepy. They're
yeah,
creeps.
it's creepy. And number two, ignore it. But, I
Yeah.
think, like I said, the vast majority of our fans are tremendously supportive. And I mean, again, just to start with, there was no plan, man. This is a total fluke.
Yeah.
It was just a project in class that turned into a thing. And I think the other spin-off component too is the tie-in with what I do. So let me lay out this example because you directly are part of this story, right?
Okay.
So rewind the clock. We do D&D with high school students. It starts to grow in success. The prior spring to that, I took my students to Las Vegas for the National Association of Broadcasters conference, and it was not the first trip, right? We had gone 4 times maybe, and we were at a networking event. And at this networking event, they were giving out door prizes, and the guy giving out door prizes sees my student and sees the t-shirt he's wearing. It was an Operation Ivy t-shirt. And he's like, oh, I love that band. And Sean, the kid, was like, yeah, me too. And they started talking, and the guy was like, what university are you from? And he's like, I don't go to college. I'm a high school student. And the guy's like, what? You're in Vegas at the NAB show and your high school brought you? That is so awesome. What school do you go to? They start talking. The guy turns out to be the director of corporate communications for Blackmagic Design, which is, for those who don't know the tech industry, Blackmagic Design is a company that makes a ton of stuff for film and television, both production and post-production. They own DaVinci Resolve, which is, one of the best industry tools for video editing. So this serendipitous moment, right, leads to a backstage meeting with them where we get to talk about our high school program and how amazing it is. They are blown away. They're like, I've never heard of a high school program with such a robust, television studio, a production truck, doing hundreds of productions a year. This is great. We want to be involved. We want to stay connected with you guys. Fast forward, I stay in touch with Terry Frechette. We're emailing back and forth. He hits me up in July of 2017. And the call goes like this, Dave. He goes, hey, Do you know any schools in Indiana that have media programs that might want to like crew for us on a live stream that we're doing? We're going to send equipment and one of our guys, but we kind of need crew. And I was like, well, what is it? And he's like, it's like a convention. It's called Gen Con. He's like, you ever heard of it? I was like, dude, I have a D&D tattoo on my arm. I know what Gen Con is. I'm like, hook us up. We'll be the crew. So long story short, we end up going to Gen Con 50, which is where I met you face to face for the first time because you were in on the very first stream that we shot there. And that opened up a million doors because once they saw what we could do, they were blown away and they're like, we should make this a thing, right? So next year at Gen Con, we become the official video streaming crew. And then the year after that, and it's led to GaryCon and Lexicon and all these other conventions where me and my staff guys can bring a squad of students and run professional live streams, multicam HD live streams that have just opened up so many doors, man. I mean, for my students to just feel that ownership over like, wow, we're like professionals, like we know what we're doing. We're doing live streams with amazing legends in the industry, and we're rocking it. And this is not a short day. These are, I mean, the Gen Con routine, man. These are 15-hour production days for us, but the opportunity to be able to bring my students into that world and have them just own it and rock it and feel proud of their work is amazing. And especially more recently, the actual students also happen to be nerds who play D&D, who are like geeking out over, being on stage and miking up Matt Mercer or whoever else it is, or
Yeah.
at GaryCon, in the room with Joe and Mercer and Luke Gygax and everybody. I mean, it's a real treat. It's an awesome, rewarding feeling for me to be able to bring together those two worlds that have been a part of my life for forever. And then to get my students into that mix and have them feel that pride in their workmanship,
Now you're running 5e for the kids, right?
Yeah. So yes. So far it's been 5e. I mean, we've done, through Patreon and stuff, we've done some other stuff. We've done different games as well. But we did last Halloween, we did Call of Cthulhu, and Jordan, one of the girls in the cast from season 4, she actually ran it. She was the keeper and she killed it, dude. It was awesome. It was so awesome. Like, she's a born storyteller. And we ran that as a live stream, had a blast. The kids came in costume as their characters.
Oh wow.
So two of the cast members from season 4, Jenny and DJ, they're actually boyfriend and girlfriend in real life, and they went as Brad and Janet from the Rocky Horror Picture Show. So they were, I mean, it was a lot of fun. So I think we're looking at doing a little bit more of that. I'm actually trying to schedule a Halloween, basically another Halloween one shot this year with the same crew of people. Jordan's ready to pull the trigger, and we're just kind of getting the cast in order. So that should be fun.
So yeah, so I guess it's pretty cool too if you get kids that come in as freshmen to be able to do this stuff with them for 4 years, and and like you were talking at Gen Con, that these kids have so much experience like behind the camera and doing all this stuff before they even finish high school.
Yeah, and I mean, so I'm a product of this community. I teach at the high school where I went. So when I was in this program in the late 80s and early 90s, man, we had a studio, we had pro cameras, we had some, linear edit suites, tape to tape,
Mm-hmm.
When I started teaching at the high school in 2006, most of the equipment they had was the same crap that was there when I graduated in 91.
Oh no.
So when I came in, I was like, yo, this is like a museum of broadcast technology. So I spent my first 5 years spending an incredible amount of taxpayer money to update this program, but it's worth it, man. I mean, because we have a production truck. We can literally go anywhere and shoot anything live, multicam, HD. We have a killer studio, which now has it's 100% Blackmagic. Follow up, in that relationship with Blackmagic, we have been the beneficiaries of many donations of equipment valued at thousands of dollars. Our studio is all 100% Blackmagic 4K now. So we're literally a high school with 100% 4K Blackmagic studio, the switcher, the recorder, all the cameras. And I mean, that opportunity, that's our package that we roll out with when we go to conventions, man. We're rolling out with 4K broadcast quality equipment, not like some little dinky laptop with, something. I mean, we're legit, and that opportunity for those kids to work on that stuff has been tremendous, man. I mean, they're getting freelance gigs. They're not even 18 and they're getting freelance gigs where they're making 25 an hour, so as their teacher slash, media mentor, I go far beyond just teaching them all this stuff. I kind of mentor them in a sense to understand their value. You know what I mean? Like to understand how to deal with clients. I give them templates for how to put together a quote. I give them suggested rates based on, their work and what they're doing. Because I want to prepare my kids. I want to give them the leg up that I didn't have in the industry. You know what I'm saying? Like, I want them to feel like they could walk out of high school and get work. And some of them do, Dave. The cool thing is I'm 14 years deep into this teaching career. And I have students who skipped college and went right into the industry. I have students who went to college for 1 year, to film school for 1 year, dropped out because they weren't getting their money's worth, and then went to work right into the industry. So it's a rewarding feeling now to see that, and to see how that experience for the kids who are really serious, who get it. Like you said, if they come in freshman year, it's a repeatable elective. They could take it as many times as they want. And every semester they learn more advanced equipment, more advanced, technology, editing software, whatever. So the best part of my job is that I get to do what I did professionally before switching careers to become a teacher. I worked in film and in television, so I picked up all those skill sets and experiences. I'm a multi-class, I'm a dual class, and I bring that into the classroom, man. So, I get to do what I do. I'm like the coach that gets to suit up and play the game because I'm still on the productions with them. But I also teach these kids the real valuable hands-on skills. There's no book in my class. It's all doing. So if they want to learn film, if they want to get into broadcasting, they have all the opportunities in the world, and I give them as many open opportunities to have diverse experience as possible.
Greater good says German school and university in a nutshell. Yeah, my pet peeve with academia and school here is like you spend 40 grand, 80 grand, go to school 4 years, and then you go get trained to do a job at the place you get hired. Yep. Right? If you're spending that kind of money, you should be able to just step right into a job and do the job. So I've had this conversation with my kids, and I'm like, I don't want you to go to college just to go to college. You need a plan.
I think it really does depend. I mean, I tell parents, when I started in 2006, dude, and we would have parent-teacher conferences, and parents would ask me, she's so interested, or he's so interested in film or television, are there jobs? And I'm like, yeah, there's jobs, man. There's 1,000 cable channels, and every one of those has shows. There's tens of thousands of jobs, but no one's going to bring you that on a silver platter, man. You got to go get it. You have to be better than everyone else. You have to bust your ass. You got to be there, first guy there, last guy to leave. It's so much. That's, that credo, that is all the stuff that I learned on the job. And I bring that to the classroom because a lot of these colleges will charge these kids 40, 50 grand a year. And after 4 years, these kids don't know squat. And I stay in touch with like the serious students, right? Mm-hmm. So like I get feedback from them, and they'll send me, some of them will send me emails and be like, hey, today my class spent the entire day learning how to wrap cable. Like, I'm like, I taught you that in 10 minutes, Yeah. So, I mean, and I get it. Colleges have to stretch to justify their curriculum, but it's nowhere near. I'll take the Pepsi taste test any day of the fucking week against most of the film schools. What I teach my kids in this class is way more robust than what they'll get in most of the 4-year film schools.
So, so since you started doing the D&D, incorporated that into the curriculum with the streams, how many new players have you minted?
So the show's just one side of it. Here's the crazy part, right?
Yeah.
We've been doing this now for a few years. Last year, I had a freshman girl reach out to me and say, I want to start a D&D club, and I was told that you're the guy to talk to. I'm like, well, that's awesome, believe me, but there's already like a board games club, and they kind of do that already. Why don't you just join them? She's like, no, we went there. It was lame. We want to do a D&D club. Persistent kid, right?
Yeah.
Bless her heart, you know. Finally, I start going through the motions at the administration to get it into a club, and it gets provisional status. The first meeting, she had 25 kids there, Dave.
Wow.
And it kept going up. And this momentum was incredible. Like, these kids were hungry. Like, so the late buses here at the high school leave at 4:30, right? So a lot of kids would have to leave at 4:30, but there'd be a cluster of kids who would be like, can we still play? I'm like, yeah, but I'm leaving, man. Like, so you guys, because they're in the cafeteria. I'm like, yeah, but I'm leaving. Dude, I'd go back to the studio. I'd pack up my stuff, check some emails. I'd walk out at 5:30. They would still be sitting in there playing. You know, they were hungry for it. They loved that opportunity. And I have a theory, Dave. I have a theory. And the theory is that a lot of this generation, this digital generation, has grown up on screens. They have the best video games that the world's ever seen, but they miss that chance to go beyond the screen and to use their imagination at a table with people in person and create stories. And my theory is that is tied to the gaming renaissance that we're in.
That, that's a really good speculation because, I see it in my own kids, right? My son is 20, or will be 20, is around there. And my daughter is 16, right? And, outside of, playing D&D, my son doesn't actually have a lot of in-person interactions with other people. Like, even still, the stuff they do is online, right? Like, they're playing video games together. They're watching each other play video games through Discord and hanging out. And, so that's a good point. So it brings something, back into our communities where they're starting to socialize. Because, like, when me and you were kids, it's like, your parents were like, go outside and play. I'll call you when you can come back. And, like, the door would close behind me and I'd, like, hear click. And that was the lock, right?
Yeah.
And we were boys, right? So it's like, what if I have to go to the bathroom? You're like, go pee on a tree.
Yeah.
So.
Yep. A typical summer day during what I call the golden era. The golden era for me, I don't know about you, but from 6th grade through 8th grade was a time when school wasn't too hard yet. You know what I mean? Like, with high school and challenging classes, it wasn't too hard. And we were young enough to where, like, we weren't totally into girls yet. You know what I mean? So a summer during that period, a summer day would be like, wake up, go over to my friend's house, swim in the pool for a little while, go ride bikes, come back, play D&D. Go ride bikes again, go swim in the pool, come back, playing D&D. Order a pizza, play D&D. Watch a movie, play D&D. I mean, and other games. But, like, we could burn through, campaigns in a month because we were playing 8 hours a day, 4 hours a day, whatever. But it was, that was life, and we would do plenty of other things. Like I said, watch a movie or play ping pong or, sports, ride bikes, swim, whatever. Go out to the woods and build forts. Like, but, we had video games too, but it wasn't the means of our social interaction.
No.
So much of what the digital generation does online is social media or gaming together online. And yes, it's a form of together. Like, my son's in high school, he plays a bunch of different games and he's always online with his friends. That's how, especially in COVID times, that's how he's staying connected. But man, it's something different when I see these younger kids start to get into the game, especially the newbies. You know what I mean? And again,
Yeah.
I think that's part of the fan base is genuinely enjoying the experience of seeing these kids grow, seeing them start to see how this is a story and how they can have an impact on that story, and seeing them start to develop teamwork and, creative solutions for problems and stuff. And it's a great thing, and it's, I think it speaks to maybe some of the reason for that. So yeah, but I mean, this D&D club was going great, man. I mean, we had, before COVID hit, we were up to 35 or 38 members, and it was growing.
You
COVID
remember
hit.
when you were lucky to know like three other kids that
Oh,
played?
yeah. Well, I mean, dude, up until
Mm,
college, I only played with my group, right?
yeah.
Only the circle of friends. And we'd bring like a guy in every once in a while, some new friend that we'd meet in high school. But it was always just the guys. And
Yeah.
then in college that circle grew, and the college group of guys I still play with, and some of the high school guys I still even play with, even decades later. But but yeah, it's crazy. These kids, how diligent they were, they didn't let COVID stop them. So we're right now, our high school's it's in week 2 of hybrid. So they split the
Yeah.
class by alphabet, half the kids, reduce the number of kids, keep them socially distanced, masked. But sports and activities are still very limited. So we can't do D&D club face to face.
Next week, I think next week my kid starts with hybrid. And then my son, like, they went back to, so everything's online, but they were having their lab and you have to go in. And now they're even like splitting that up even more than it was.
Yeah.
So,
Well, the
um,
remote thing, everything's over Zoom. That's what we did for
yeah.
the entire first quarter. And then we came back last week in person, hybrid. Already had a case.
So you
Already had
must have had quite the leg up on the rest of your colleagues when it came to
Yeah.
doing this stuff.
Oh yeah. I mean, I have lights. I have cameras up. I can multicam my Zoom for all
Well, and
that stuff.
you're already familiar with streaming and doing things
Right.
online. So
Yeah.
where a
It's
lot of
it's
these
still
teachers, it's new for them.
Yeah. It's still a juggling act even for me though, because you're teaching synchronously
Yeah.
to the kids who are remote to the other half of the alphabet while you have kids in person. So I'm like streaming to two different audience
Yeah.
basically.
Yeah.
But the kids in the D&D club would not be defeated. They started up their own Discord,
Uh huh.
and they're running games on Discord. And I'm like, I keep funneling new kids because new kids will email me like, "Hey, what's going on with D&D club?" And I'm like, "Well, we can't meet in person yet, but
Yeah. Yeah.
here's the link to the Discord."
How big is that Discord?
I think they're up to 60 people. So
Nice.
it's really, I love it. I love seeing this new generation of kids getting into the game. Um, and you know what? It's funny because like part of me is like, oh, you can't teach an old dog new tricks, but I actually learn from them too. Be honest with you, I learned from them. Like there are things that I never, and before the stream started, we were talking about how things were back in the day.
Yeah.
Like I don't remember getting emotional about games or having safety tools at games. And I think a part of that was because we were best friends and knew each other and knew our triggers and knew the boundaries. But when you're playing with groups of people who you don't know, a lot of the younger kids have kind of communicated things to me where I learned about group chemistry and sensitivity and stuff. So um, they're very different. They're a different generation, and how they play the game is different. But I think ultimately, it's really good to see younger kids getting into tabletop games and learning all the benefits of them that we got.
Yeah. I would even just sum it up as, you know what, we were kind of a-holes, and the generations that are coming up now are just kind of better people.
Yeah,
So,
I think there's some truth to that. In terms of being sensitive to each other. I think the other thing, honestly, man, is um, I we never had girls play with us. I think the closest thing that I had to that was in high school. my girlfriend played a couple sessions of Gamma World with us.
Mm.
And I remember like getting the death eyes from my friends because I had crossed the barrier. Like,
Yeah.
I allowed a girl to play with us. And we were totally high school nerd boys who were gatekeepers. And the idea that a girl could play with us, never flew. But then, later on in life, in college, then, other girls played with us. And then, even years later, like, I'm like, wow, there's a whole world where females play games and it's
Yeah.
pretty cool and they're awesome. Like, and but again, I mean, personal growth, you got to kind of get out there in the world to see that. But this younger generation, like, they don't even think twice about that. Like, they don't even think twice about it. In fact, I'm pretty sure that more of the D&D club membership are girls than boys. And if it's not more, it's pretty damn close to 50-50.
Yeah.
So I think it's
Yeah.
awesome.
And
I think it's great.
growing up, we would occasionally have like the SO that would show up, right, to
Yeah.
hang out with their boyfriend or whatever, but they weren't
Right.
really into it.
Yeah.
And it wasn't very often. I mean, in that way, I will say our group was okay. We were pretty open with that, but just our personalities, that was our gatekeeperness, us just being a-holes. So
Well, and I think everybody, even our age though,
yeah.
had different levels of things. Like, I'm not going to say I was a popular kid, but I also remember being kind of in the closet when it came to high school about D&D, about playing role-playing games because, by high school, it was kind of, I had friends who like would go to lunch and classes with like D&D books. They just didn't care. And part of
Yeah.
me admired them about that. I was like, you just got balls, man. You don't even care if people think you're a gaming nerd. But I was a little more closeted about that. Um, but again, in college, it was like none of those silly things mattered. You could just be who you were. And epic gaming level happened in college. Probably far too many. That's probably why it took me 7 years to graduate. Um, I mean, we had marathon runs into
Yeah.
4 or 5 a.m. That was another world. But I think it's great now, especially like when we go to conventions, man, to see the variety of people and to see families. I was lucky enough to have my son at the last live Gen Con that we did. And just for him to be able to walk around and check out stuff, to play in games. We went mini painting together. You know how they do the
Yeah.
mini painting demo.
Yeah. The paint
Um,
takes.
yeah, and I mean, it was so cool as a dad. And I know your son's been to Gen Con too and stuff. He's a little bit older than mine, but man, I mean, it was awesome. And I think it's cool to see the variety of people who are getting into gaming, of all ages and backgrounds, and it certainly, it creates other things, complications and considerations that we all have to think about if we're going to engage in that, like, again, this, sensitivity things and safety tools. But I don't mind that. I mean, I think it's great. You get to know somebody who's a stranger, and hopefully by the end of that gaming session, you got something out of it, whether you're playing in the game or running the game. You meet different people and you learn something about their play style that wasn't part of your jam before. So I think it's good because it expands our horizons. You know what I mean?
Nah, absolutely. You guys also run conventions, right? You run a
Yeah.
convention.
So that again, just none of these things were planned, man. Bill Allan World was
Yeah.
literally just I couldn't think of another thing to call it because it was just the world of all my crap.
Yeah. Yeah.
But um, it as the interest in gaming grew, it kind of dovetailed in with our friendly local game store moving. They were a couple suburbs over, and they opened up a second location here in town, and it was awesome. They're super like supportive. They host gaming, they host learn to plays, they host mini painting. There are a lot of events, and they're a great store, great staff, all that stuff. But we wanted to partner with them and to do a convention, and we had the right space. The high school space was huge, so we have a place called the Corral, and it's kind of like a student union, like a college student union, except our high school has this building, and it's not attached to the main building. It's separate from it, so it's its own venue, and it's literally the perfect place to have a convention. I mean, it's got like an 800 person capacity, but totally open space. It's got a stage if you want to do stuff on stage, and we have done stuff on stage, but limitless number of tables and chairs, plenty of room for vendors. So again, my buddy Brian Thomas and I, from Initiative Coffee Company, came together with this idea. We pitched it to the school, came up with the layout, brought in vendors, brought in, D&D Adventurers League, friendly local game store, and just started running this convention. And it's been great. We just had our third one last February. And it's awesome. It's like a well-oiled machine,
So you got one in before the world ended, huh?
Yes. Yeah. It was, and that's the crazy part. Like, it was like literally we had LionCon, and then the next week people were like, there's a virus coming out of China. And I was like, but it was cool. Like, everything worked. So, now, of course, I don't know if we'll have LionCon in February of 2021. That remains to be seen. Right now, not looking very optimistic based on our area, in Chicago.
Yeah.
COVID numbers rising in the Midwest. But
there's a thing in March that I was supposed to do, and I'm like, I don't know. It doesn't look good.
Well, GaryCon, so we're set to do the video for GaryCon again. And I don't know, if it's going to be in person, or if it's going to be a mix of in-person and online stuff. I'm not really sure. That's something that I'll have to find out. But GaryCon's one of those conventions where it's great for us because we're doing the video stuff, but it's also just cool to be at that convention. I've run games at GaryCon before with, amazing people. I've been able to meet some of our childhood legends, like, when you're like, oh my God, that's David Zeb Cook, or like, no, there's Ernie Gygax,
I was on the fence about going to GaryCon this year, and then the decision was made for me. Well, because actually this weekend coming up, we're actually supposed to be hanging out at Nerdarchy Nerdarchy, the convention, but the end of the world. So, like, I wanted to take a look at GaryCon, and I had already checked out GameholeCon, and those were the kind of conventions I wanted to model with our own kind of twist on it. Yeah. Being having a heavy influence from YouTubers and streamers and podcasters.
And that, I think, dude, God willing, we'll have Nerdarchy-Con, next year, Halloween. 2021. But I mean, that's the kind of thing where, like, in a lot of ways, smaller conventions, to me at least, feel a little bit more comfortable. Gen Con can be overwhelming. It's amazing, but it's kind of like going to a nonstop rock concert. It's so intense for so long that, like, by the end of Gen Con, you're just wiped out.
Well, it's like a convention city. My first convention was Origins, which was a decent warm up for Gen Con.
Right.
Yeah,
that's not a small convention anymore.
Yeah. And then my third convention was PAX Unplugged. Right. Now, Ted's been to a bunch of conventions, but, like, he goes to all, like, more local, small. Like, I think the biggest convention he would go to was Steampunk World's Fair, and they would rent, like, 4 hotels. Right. So it was decent size. So when we both did PAX Unplugged the first year, he was looking around going, wow, this is really big. This is the biggest convention I've been to. And so at that point, that was actually, like, my smallest convention, right?
Yeah.
And I was a little disappointed. I was like, I know it's the first year for PAX Unplugged, but you guys have done so many conventions. I don't think you get to cry first year.
Yeah.
They do like 4 or 5 conventions a year, and they've been doing that for a while.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. I mean, I think there are pros and cons. I like smaller conventions. It's almost like small, medium, large, right? Like,
yeah.
if that was your category, like you said, Gen Con is a convention city. I mean, it's literally all of Indianapolis. Everywhere you go is Gen Con, Gen Con. But then, medium size, I think Gary Con's kind of hit that medium size thing now where it's so popular that they're at capacity in terms of doing it in Lake Geneva. I hope they keep it there. I hope they figure out a way to expand it and make it more accessible to keep it in Lake Geneva, because I think there's something special about having that in the birthplace of TSR and D&D.
Yeah.
And it's just, I mean, for me, it's a personal preference too, right? Because Lake Geneva is like an hour drive from Chicago, so it's a
Yeah,
lot
yeah. So
easier to
that's
get up
nice.
there. But
Yeah.
I've done like a lot of the smaller conventions too, and um, our convention's a micro convention, but it has all the cool little elements, and that's what I love. I love the opportunity to provide that locally here, and we don't charge a crazy amount to the vendors, so it's a good deal for them, and it's a great deal for us to have that ambiance and have like a nice selection of stuff that you would find at a convention.
So is that like a fundraiser for the school? Is it for profit?
Yeah. So all the clubs. So the original one, we had like four clubs. We had the anime and sci-fi club. We had the
Yeah.
board games club. We had LTTV, which is our media club, and then the Corral, which is the club that kind of does the activities at the Corral. So they kind of collaborated over the years as the burden has fallen more on us. We still do it as a fundraiser, but we kind of take our costs over the top, right? Because
Mm.
every year we try to do something different. So we'll bring in certain people to do panels, or we'll just basically provide, free badges or food vouchers for the volunteers who work the event. So I kind of look at it as like it's kind of an event that's, well, it's not even kind of, it's an event that's open to the community, and it's very family friendly. We get a lot of people bringing their little kids. We have volunteers doing like coloring stations and little mini crafting stations for kids and adults. So it's a fundraiser, it's a community event, with a little bit of different flavor each year. We kind of try out different things, and some things we keep, some things we change and kind of modify as we grow.
What are the interactions between you and the parents like since you've introduced like D&D into the mix?
It is, dude, it's so funny how many of these parents, either the mom or dad or both, played D&D, and then they're like excited that their kid,
Yeah.
is playing and is on the shows. Yeah, it's been funny. Like I would say from almost every season, there's been at least one person whose parents played, or back in the day, and like they told me about that. So it's kind of a funny recurring thing that we get.
Do you get people taking your class now because they just want to be part of the show? Um, and break
Well,
into
so the
to
funny
the
thing is,
streaming D&D scene.
I think not so much because they want to be on the show, but more because they see the opportunities that it's opened up, like going to the conventions or going to Las Vegas for the broadcasters conference, or I mean, we're also like this is the crazy thing, like we've had all these positive things happen from the gaming and the streaming, um but we're also like a national award-winning sports program. Like
Yeah.
2 years ago, we won the like first in the nation. We won a student Emmy for sports. So we probably do 80 live sports events every school year. Now with COVID, it's a little bit different, but typically, I mean, we cover all the varsity fall sports, winter sports, and spring sports, boys and girls. And I mean, it's something that is like just part of the jam. So I kind of get a mix of kids. I get kids who are really interested in broadcasting and sports broadcasting. I get kids who are interested in studio productions and shows. And then I get kids who are kind of more into the filmmaking side, and they want to make, movies, short films, music videos, that kind of stuff. So I think a lot of them are interested in the gaming side of it. And I encourage them all. I'm like, you don't have to be on my show. This is your studio. It's your school. You can have your own shows. Like, come up with the game, cast it, and tell me the concept you want to look for, and then we'll bring it in and figure out the lighting that you want to go with. We'll figure out your vibe. If you want to use minis or terrain, that kind of stuff. I mean, that's the great thing, is that the opportunities are there. So
Is that happening now?
It's starting to, like with
Yeah.
Jenny and Jordan, and more recently, like from season 4, they're very like cross trained, right? Like
Yeah.
they could do killer D&D games, like I said, Call of Cthulhu. So I think what we're moving towards is a model where they could have their own shows and cast those shows, with people. And I mean, I think it'd be awesome. Like it would make me exceedingly happy to see the kids take that level of ownership and start doing, shows.
That's funny
I would love to
because
see other genres of games too. Like, I'd love it if somebody would play some sci-fi games or post-apocalyptic games. That'd be cool.
it's funny because if they were to start doing that in their first, second year of school, they might have their own business by the time they were done.
Yeah.
Well, we had Crit Crab on here, and it's just like he does like voiceover with images and stuff like that on his D&D story videos. And so it turns out like he's just this 19-year-old kid that was living in a van and started a YouTube channel.
Yeah.
And and now like he probably makes more money than his parents, and
Yeah.
they're telling he's got to listen to them be like, you should get a real job.
Yeah.
So it's funny, it's weird. The world has definitely changed. The fact that like we can do stuff like this, for a living, and like even you've taken your real job, right, and kind of transitioned it into this fantasy job of mashing your hobbies into your other passions.
Right. And I mean, the thing is that, I mean, there's a lot of people we both mutually know who started off at the same time as me, but their channel has, 100,000 subscribers or 250,000 subscribers. And a lot of those guys, what they have in common is that they went full time. They made the jump, right?
Yeah.
Which, I don't think I would ever do that, because for me, I mean, I went into teaching. I already changed careers. You know what I mean? Like, I did film and TV professionally, and then I was a career changer and went to teach it. When I went to
teaching's a good gig, man. You guys get like a pension and everything, right?
Yeah. And I mean, my job's a little different because
Yeah.
I have a split contract. I'm part administrator, part teacher. So I don't get summers off. I'm a 12-month employee. But I teach what I did professionally, and I love that part of it. And I love the program that I built here in the last 14 years. And when I say the word 14 years, Dave, it has flown by. Like, it feels like I started yesterday, So when I think it's like when you do what you love, time flies, and it's been a rewarding career that, I hopefully, God willing, I'll be able to work for a lot longer and, keep things growing here. And the kids always provide some new spark of creativity, and who knows, like I would love to have them take ownership and start doing their own shows and their own channels and stuff, and springboard off of what we built. That would be awesome.
Academia needs more Bill Allens in it anyway, to be honest with you. There's too much of the problem is it's an institution, right? Like prison or the military.
Yeah.
And when you go from an institution going through school to working in an institution, like there's certain world experiences you never get. Yeah. And those people should not be advising kids on how to go into the world, right? People like you are perfect because you've done it. You had a career, and then you changed careers, for whatever reason. But now you have like that real world experience you can bring back to them, and prepare them for how things really are. Because you could be like, hey, if you work in a production crew this way, this is how it works. if you do it this way, they're taking advantage of you and they're going to screw you,
Yep.
and like, you know, all the pitfalls, right? Like, like construction can be great if you get into a union, or you could be, slubbing along for $10 an hour, yeah, with no benefits.
Yeah. And
So,
I think part of that is kind of keeping it in the family too, because those students who were really involved in the program, who I've kept up with over the years, those alumni, we're a tight family. I mean, my right hand, David Crawfa, who you've met,
mhm,
he's at all the conventions. He's one of my students. He was a former student, one of my first. Now
yeah,
he doesn't just work for me. He works for another production company and he does freelance work. And but like we stay close. And what's crazy, Dave, is that now I'm at a point in my career this deep where some of those kids that graduated in the first 3, 4, 5 years of me teaching are now in the industry, like, and anchored in it, and they are opening doors for other students, right? It's crazy. So like one of the D&D with high school students cast members, a girl by the name of Heather, she was in the first season and the second season, and she graduated from high school. She went to film school thinking she wanted to major in production design, dropped out, came back home, and started taking these special effects makeup classes, and got in with some of my former students who are alums who work in the Chicago film industry, and were able to get her on set. And she started working with these people. So they're opening doors for the newer generation, which is awesome. Like that network is how so many things in the creative industry work, right? But it's that authentic opportunity. So here's a girl who didn't have to pay. And by the way, this was Savannah College of Art and Design. So it would have been 50 grand a year. She would have been $200,000 in the hole for a 4-year degree where she would have gotten paid $250 a day on set. So instead, she spent a couple grand to get, certified with these different kinds of special effects, uh, makeup classes. And, she started interning and working on set and learning on the job. And there's nothing better than that. Like the ability to say F you to the system and
yeah.
get a job and have your value, and you got to bust your ass, but it's there. If you go out and get it, it's there. And it's funny you mentioned about other teachers, because there are a few people in the gaming community also who are teachers. Like, Nate from WASD 20. He's a teacher. He does map making tutorials. He has a lot of content on his channel. And it's funny because sometimes we get these questions about, how do the RPG skills and experiences translate into an educational thing? I think I've been interviewed like probably 4 or 5 times by different people about RPGs and education. And I'm a huge advocate for it. Huge. Because I don't know about you, man, but I can list off how did D&D help me, right? How about math? Like, I'm really good at adding things together fast because you had to add up all those modifiers, and
And
especially
count backwards.
yeah, first edition, if you could do THACO in your head, hey, so math, reading, like I'm a slow reader even to this day, but I love reading because I like to learn about things and I like to immerse my mind in fiction. History, I got really into history and cultures and archaeology again because I wanted to know more. How many third graders could tell you the hit points of all the Norse gods? I could because I had deities and demigods, and that engendered an interest in learning more about other cultures and other histories and ancient myths and language. Like I started getting into language study because I thought it would be a cool flavor. But all of those things that I got into came out of D&D. It fueled an interest in learning. And then
And
you think about how
you
you
didn't
get
even
along with
touch
people.
on, the social skills, the social
Right,
aspect,
right. And then the social aspect, teamwork, problem solving. How many times in games do you have to come across, a situation? And I'm not just talking about roll dice and kill shit. I mean,
Mhm.
like, there's a logistical solution, a non-combat encounter, and you have to figure out how to overcome that, or traps or riddles. And you work with people in a team to accomplish a goal. Um, you know, Speaking skills. the ability to articulate something, an idea, and describe it vividly. That's like DM skills, world building, getting into artistic things, whether you jam on map making or just writing or creating pantheons of gods. All those things are great educational tools. Do I think that they could be used in education? Absolutely. If I could open up my own, like, high school Montessori program, like RPGs would be the foundation.
Hmm.
And then they would tie into everything else. They tie into, English and foreign language and history. And, I mean, it's limitless.
Yeah, I mean, one of our friends that we met from doing this, Megan Hardy, she does Outschool and just runs like educational D&D games for
Yeah.
like 60, 70 hours a week.
Yeah. Well,
So
dude, I mean, I'm sure that at some point in your life, you probably ran a D&D campaign that was based somewhere on some actual historical things, right? Like, I know for us, we tried to do a like an Arthurian D&D game, right?
mhm.
So and just to prepare for this stupid game, I was like researching the extent to which the Roman Empire had colonized Britain at the time, and like we were looking into the actual truths of Druidism and Celtics, the Celtic mythology. Like, we wanted it to be as authentic and accurate as it could be. So the amount of research that we put into this campaign was like 8 times longer than the actual amount of time we played the freaking game. You know what I mean?
There's a lot of rabbit holes to go down, that's for
Well, yeah.
sure.
And that's what I mean. Like, it was so fun to do that. And the same thing could be said about so many other settings. Like, my brother Jeff invented a game back in like '83 called like International Mercenaries and Commandos, IMAC. And the games were mostly set during the Vietnam War. And he had all these scenarios, and they were so realistic, hyper realistic, because he would do research on like the Battle of Quezon and like all this other stuff. And he had, tactical maps that this is before the internet, man. So he would have to go to a
Yeah.
library and like photocopy books of like, the Ho Chi Minh Trail and like, incursions into Laos and stuff. And it was so cool to immerse yourself in this stuff. And I think that was all formative. That was all educational, man.
So it's all good stuff, and
Yeah.
and then so I guess the other thing, maybe it doesn't like translate into a tangible life skill, right? But the relationships and friendships you build around this game is that that's crazy, because got I've got people that I've been playing with for 20 plus years.
Yeah.
I'm very good friends with my brother-in-law Ted because of this game, right? If it wasn't for D&D, I don't know that we would have the same relationship that we do, but it's this shared common interest that really brings people together. And you can meet a gamer for the first time that you've never talked to before, but you find you have so much in common because you have these shared experiences playing this game. And before you know it, like 15, 20, 30 minutes into a conversation, you feel like you've been friends with this person forever.
Yeah. I would 100% agree with that, dude. And so many of the relationship building elements are kind of part of who I am, for better or worse. Like, so I often tell my wife that, like, when we go to social events, I oftentimes feel more comfortable finding my tribe, right? Like, if I go there and there's a bunch of guys talking about their stocks and their investments or sports, I'm like, yeah, I don't really know that language,
Yeah.
So I try to find the other people, who might be into Game of Thrones or whatever, who might be kind of closer to my tribe. But I think I agree, it absolutely has an impact on relationships. And again, of the original clan of friends from childhood, I still keep in touch with two of them. We don't get to play as often just because of scheduling, but we have had D&D games within the last decade that were awesome. So, and then the college guys, that group, I was kind of the newcomer to. So my college roommate, Chris, and his buddies grew up playing games together, grew up playing D&D, and had kept up and continued playing. And in like 2008, I want to say, maybe even earlier, they started doing gaming weekends, and they'd get together from all over the country, right? Like one of them's out by you in
Yeah.
Philly, another one's in Texas, a couple of them in Illinois. They'd get together, meet up, and just have a weekend of gaming, and usually meat because they're like hunters, and meat, alcohol, and gaming.
Yeah.
And I was like the new guy, I met them in college, right? But so we've known each other for decades. We get together once a year, and it is nirvana, dude. It's 3 days of just shit talking and rolling dice and fun old fashioned gaming, and like before the stream started, I told you when we started this gaming weekend stuff, we were playing third edition and 3.5, continued it through fourth edition briefly, then went to Pathfinder, same campaign, then went to fifth edition. And this ongoing gaming weekend campaign has been going on for 12 years, something like that. And it's awesome. So those friendships, those social things totally click, totally. It's like you could be, you could be away from each other for months or even years, but when you sit down at that table, it's like riding a bike, man. Like you might be a little rusty at first, but it comes right back, and all of a sudden you're in the game.
You just got to get those folks online now.
Yeah. And that's okay. So here's the crazy part. The gaming weekend, obviously with COVID, didn't happen. So we have been playing. And my buddy Dan, who's out there in Philly, he bought the pro account for Roll20 and set it all up. So we've been getting together once a month to play, and it's awesome. I mean, it's not quite the same, but we always do a cheers to everybody, cheers over the screen, and we start getting into it. And it's a blast. It's good to get with those guys and good to play. And I've been able to play, just like speaking of getting able to play, you and me played in that Monster of the Week 2-shot over on Juice's channel, and that was awesome because I never get to play, so I'm usually the DM, and just to be able to play a different game and one that's so easy to pick up was awesome. Yeah, I mean
that was definitely a lot of fun. And then we have another game coming up. We're going to be playing bi-weekly over on Juice's channel. We're going to be playing second edition Pathfinder.
Yeah, and I'm excited about that. I was telling you before we started, I look back at the amount of times I play, and I usually make what I'll call a Bill character. If it's a fantasy game, it's usually a rogue or a bard or a warlock, somebody with its charisma based and dex based. Every once in a while I'll make a strength based kind of fire. Human fighters, those are fun too. But I don't make monster race characters very often. So this Pathfinder 2E campaign is going to be the first time ever in 42 years that I'm ever going to be playing a goblin. I've never played a goblin in any game. So I'm excited, man. I'm pumped.
I have too, man. So I'm also going to be playing a goblin. I really don't know very much about second edition Pathfinder. We actually did like a kind of like a dry run and made up some characters. And the character creation system is a little bit complex because it's got a lot of moving parts. And and I didn't really look at like the mechanics behind things. I was just like, oh, that sounds cool. That sounds cool. That sounds cool. And then when you put it together, it's like, oh, this is a very mediocre character.
Yeah. What I picked up was that if you just follow the basic walkthrough, and that's a big book. We were talking about that too. That Pathfinder 2E book is not messing around, bro. That's like, you could bludgeon someone to death with that thing. It's huge.
Yeah, it's pretty thick.
But the thing that I like is that if you just follow like any basic character creation tutorial, the character you make will be fine, because they openly admit in Pathfinder 2E that it's kind of engineered to make your characters more on the heroic scale, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's not grindcore. It's not like you're rolling up stats and you're gonna get like a 6 in one of your stats. Like the worst thing you'll have, even with a stat flaw in 2E, is maybe an 8 or something. Like it's not real bad. So I'm looking forward to it, and I think I agree with you. The character creation thing is a little bit different. To me, Um, this is the first game I'll be playing where they don't use races. They use
Yeah.
ancestries. And ancestries are your, human, elf, dwarf, all that stuff. So I mean, is it just a word? I don't know, because the way that they build it, what you pick for your ancestry then affects some of your stat boosts, but you get these free boosts. So it's kind of an interesting point buy system that isn't really point buy, but it kind of is. You know what I mean?
Yeah, all these different decisions affect,
Yeah,
and it's usually add something here and pick something you want there.
right.
Yeah, and well, race in D&D has always been a misnomer anyway.
Yeah,
It's just that species, like really, they're species, right? It's
right.
like,
Yeah,
but that sounds very sci-fi.
yeah,
So it's like, I mean, because it's always weird to me when people try and use real world analogs for D&D races.
yeah,
But that's like, to me, it's more like, sometimes it's more like comparing a person to a dog or a bear, right?
right.
Because like, you have a minotaur and a halfling, right? Like,
Yeah,
they're so far removed from each other, or a centaur.
right.
They're all so very far removed from what we have in the real world. Like, in the real world, we are all the same species. We're all just humans, right?
Right.
And we can come from different cultures or whatever. But, in the game, it's not even close, right? Like, you would think, like, on Earth, everybody can crossbreed with everybody, but in D&D, not necessarily, right?
Yes.
Because, why? Because they're not even close to being the same species.
Right. Right. And I think I the way I look at that in gaming is that I remember in the 80s, like when the Salvatore books came out and Drist was, Crystal Shard trilogy. Drist was like, this cool anti-hero drow who rebelled against drow culture. The idea of the good drow. And there was a period of time, man, where like everybody I played with wanted to make a drow. They all wanted to make drows, and they
Yeah.
wanted drow hand crossbows and drow poison darts, and they wanted to dual wield scimitars. Like, and I remember being like, whatever. Like, they're just a reskinned version of an elf. Like, to me, that's all it was. Like, I didn't really get into it, but I see why people did. And I think it's funny what I see. I took a little survey of my cast members and my students, and I said, if you could play in the coolest D&D setting that you've never played in, no one's ever explored it before, and it's got this totally amazing rich culture and adventures, you could play only humans, or you could play in a Forgotten Realms game and play any race you want. Which would you play? And they're like, Forgotten Realms with any race I want. So like
Yeah.
the choice, it was the choice, right? Like they want the choice. And I said, what if I sweeten the deal? And I said, you could only play humans, but you get like a free feat thrown in at first level and a stat boost. Like one of your stats is heroic. Like you start off with a 20. And they're like, yeah, Forgotten Realms and races.
Yeah, the human has always been a hard sell until third edition, like for our group anyway. I can
Yeah.
only speak for our group. Until third edition, and we could, get that feat, and that made it, that made it better.
Yeah. And I mean, and so I feel like it's a cycle. I go through periods where I'm like, oh, I really want to make, a certain kind of thing, right? I really like I went through a halfling period where I made a halfling barbarian rogue, and he was a total blast to play. And I just loved halflings because, fifth edition halflings kind of get some cool thing. Like, I mean, like
Yeah.
lucky, or just being able to move through your allies' spaces because you're small. Like those are really cool little features, right? Then I went through a wood elf phase where I was like, wood elves rule. They're 35 movement, the whole hiding in mist and foliage thing. Um, I go through phases, but I always come back to humans, and I think it's because of that variant option allowing feats. I like the idea that at first level I can make a kind of customized character with a special thing at first level, and it draws me back to humans. I think for that same reason that 3.5 did. Same thing.
So I'm gonna have to cut you short there. We're about 10 minutes past the hour. Uh, so with that, I first of all, there are links in the description. Go check out Bill Allan if you haven't yet. You have a great channel over there, and he actually does more than the D&D with high schoolers. We didn't even get into any of that. You just have so much cool stuff going on, Bill. And
well,
the stuff you're doing with the kids in the film is so interesting. But final thoughts before we head on out?
Dave, final thoughts are I'm grateful that I have the blessed life that I have. I get to do what I love, get to play games, get to meet cool people, and I just want to keep that going. I appreciate the support of all my subscribers and my patrons on Patreon who literally keep this thing going, because otherwise my wife would not let my hobby take up this much of my time. And
Yeah.
and I am very much looking forward to playing in the Pathfinder 2e campaign with you. Our Goblin brothers are going to kick some butt. So thanks for having me,
And
dude.
blow some things up along the way.
Yeah. Thanks for having me on the chat. It's always a blast, man.
Yeah, thanks for coming on, Bill. And everyone else, until next time.